The gavel slammed down, the sound echoing in the otherwise silent courtroom. But the sound was nothing compared to the slam I felt in my chest, the world tilting on its axis. My carefully constructed life, the future I had envisioned, shattered into a million pieces, right there. All thanks to them. The very people who should have been my strongest allies, my unwavering support, had become my betrayers. They watched, stone-faced, as the judge read the verdict. The culmination of their meticulous plotting and malicious intent finally realized. They thought they had broken me, that I would crumble under the weight of their deceit. They were wrong. If you've ever felt the sting of betrayal from those closest to you, subscribe now so we can share our stories of resilience together and know that you're not alone. I remember the beginning so clearly. Fresh out of law school, bright-eyed and idealistic, I was determined to make a difference. My family, however, had other plans for me. They ran a successful real estate business, built from the ground up by my grandfather, and they expected me to join the fold, to use my legal knowledge to further their empire. But my passion lay elsewhere. I wanted to help the underprivileged, to fight for those who couldn't afford to fight for themselves. It wasn't about the money for me. It was about justice. So I started volunteering at a local legal aid clinic, taking on pro bono cases, and working tirelessly to make a dent in the overwhelming need. I burned the candle at both ends, juggling my responsibilities to my family with my commitment to my clients, until one day my father confronted me. "Adeline," he said, his voice laced with disappointment, "this isn't what we envisioned for you. All those years of schooling, and you're throwing it away on lost causes." I tried to explain my passion, my desire to use my skills for good, but he wouldn't listen. He saw my pro bono work as a threat to the family business, a distraction from what he considered my true calling. The tension escalated, arguments became frequent, and the rift between us widened with each passing day. My brother, Mark, was no better. Always the golden child, he excelled in everything he did, effortlessly charming and ambitious. He saw my dedication to legal aid as a personal affront, a sign that I didn't value the family legacy as much as he did. He constantly belittled my efforts, questioning my motives and undermining my confidence. My mother, caught in the middle, tried to play peacemaker, but her attempts were feeble and ultimately ineffective. She loved us both, but her loyalty lay with my father and his vision for the family. The pressure mounted, the strain unbearable. But I refused to back down. I believed in what I was doing, and I was determined to make a difference, regardless of their disapproval. Then came the day when a close friend confided in me about a shady deal within the family business, one that could potentially ruin countless innocent families. I was floored. They were actively harming people while preaching about family values. This was where I drew the line. I started collecting evidence, meticulously documenting every transaction, every conversation, every discrepancy. I knew it was a risky move, going up against my own family, but I couldn't stand by and watch them exploit others for their own gain. I felt like I was fighting a hydra. Every time I exposed one head, another grew back. This made them desperate, and desperation makes people do crazy things. The person I trusted most was one of them. It was my cousin, Emily. We had grown up together, shared secrets, and supported each other through thick and thin. I confided in her about my investigation, believing she would understand my desire to do what was right. I showed her the evidence I had gathered, trusting her discretion. I was wrong. She betrayed my confidence, running straight to my father and Mark with everything I had told her. They used my trust against me, twisting my words and painting me as a rogue agent intent on destroying the family. That was when the attack started. Subtle at first, a whispering campaign, spreading rumors about my competence and integrity within the legal community. I was devastated, but I kept going. Then came the formal complaint to the state bar, accusing me of practicing law illegally because of my work with clients I assisted outside of my official capacity. Work they knew I did pro bono. It was a blatant attempt to discredit me, to destroy my career, and to silence me before I could expose their illicit activities. The disciplinary judge had well, that's a story for another day. The complaint triggered an investigation, and my life became a whirlwind of depositions, interrogations, and endless paperwork. My days were consumed by preparing my defense, gathering evidence to refute their false accusations, and trying to salvage my reputation. Sleepless nights were spent replaying every conversation, every interaction, searching for any misstep that could have led to this. The weight of the injustice was crushing, the betrayal of my own family a constant ache in my chest. I tried to talk to my parents, to reason with them, to explain my side of the story, but they refused to listen. They had already made up their minds, convinced that I was the one in the wrong. Mark reveled in my misfortune, his smug satisfaction palpable in every encounter. He saw this as an opportunity to finally eliminate me from the family business, to consolidate his power and solidify his position as the heir apparent. My mother, torn between her loyalty to her husband and her love for her daughter, remained silent, offering only fleeting glances of sympathy that did little to ease the pain. I felt isolated, abandoned, as if I was fighting a battle against an invisible enemy, one that knew my weaknesses and exploited them mercilessly. My practice suffered, clients left, and my income dwindled, just as they planned. The legal aid clinic, already struggling to stay afloat, was forced to let me go, dealing a devastating blow to my morale and my ability to help those in need. It was a calculated move, designed to strip me of my purpose, to leave me feeling helpless and defeated. I attempted to reconcile with Emily, hoping that she would see the error of her ways, but she remained steadfast in her betrayal. She claimed she had acted out of love for the family, that she believed she was protecting them from my reckless actions. But I knew the truth. She was motivated by jealousy, by a deep-seated resentment of my independence and my refusal to conform to their expectations. She had always envied my passion, my drive to make a difference, and she saw this as an opportunity to tear me down, to bring me down to her level. I tried to explain to her the harm they were causing, the families they were exploiting, but she refused to listen, blinded by her loyalty to my father and her desire for his approval. Our friendship, once a source of strength and comfort, was now shattered beyond repair, leaving a gaping void in my life. I reached out to other family members, hoping to find someone who would believe me, who would stand by me in this time of need. But they were all too afraid to go against my father. They had seen what he was capable of, and they didn't want to risk becoming his next target. I was alone, fighting a battle against a powerful and ruthless enemy, with no allies and no hope of escape. My vision blurred, the glass in my hand shattered as I read another email, a nasty smear piece meant to discourage future clients. And that's when I realized I had to fight back. The stress took a toll. My hair started falling out in clumps. I couldn't eat. Every time the phone rang, I felt a jolt of anxiety, wondering what new disaster awaited me. I started having nightmares, reliving the betrayal over and over again, waking up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding in my chest. I considered giving up, walking away from it all, but I knew that would be exactly what they wanted. They wanted me to be silenced, to disappear, to let them continue their illicit activities with fear of exposure. But I couldn't do it. I owed it to myself, to the families they were hurting, to fight for justice, even if it meant risking everything. So I started documenting everything, every conversation, every interaction, every attempt to intimidate me. I knew that evidence would be my only weapon, my only chance of proving my innocence and exposing their crimes. I became meticulous, recording phone calls, saving emails, and taking detailed notes of every meeting. I knew they were watching me, waiting for me to slip up. But I was careful, always one step ahead of them. It was exhausting, a constant battle of wits, but I refused to be broken. They may have taken everything from me, but they couldn't take my spirit, my determination to fight for what was right. I would not let them win. The day of the hearing arrived like a storm cloud, heavy with dread. I walked into the courtroom, the air thick with unspoken accusations. My family sat on the other side, their faces masks of cold indifference. Even my mother avoided my gaze. Mark smirked. The disciplinary judge, a stern woman with piercing eyes, called the proceedings to order. The evidence against me was presented, twisted and manipulated to paint me as an unethical, power-hungry lawyer. My attempts to defend myself were met with skepticism and thinly veiled hostility. I felt like I was drowning, gasping for air in a sea of lies. Emily testified against me, her voice dripping with false sincerity. She spoke of my erratic behavior, my obsession with bringing down the family, and my disregard for ethical boundaries. Her words were like knives, each one piercing my heart. I wanted to scream, to expose her treachery, but I knew it would be futile. They had already poisoned the well, and no one would believe me. As the hearing dragged on, my hope dwindled with each passing minute. The weight of their betrayal, the injustice of their accusations, threatened to crush me completely. I felt myself slipping, succumbing to the despair that had been lurking beneath the surface for so long. Then the gavel slammed down, the sound echoing in the otherwise silent courtroom. But the sound was nothing compared to the slam I felt in my chest, the world tilting on its axis. I remember little of the days that followed, a blur of grief, anger, and bone-deep exhaustion. I lost the case, my license was suspended, my reputation was in tatters. I was a pariah in the legal community, the object of whispers and scornful glances. My phone stopped ringing, my inbox remained empty. The life I had worked so hard to build was gone, reduced to ashes by the people I had once loved and trusted. I retreated into myself, isolating myself from the world. My apartment became my prison, the four walls closing in on me, suffocating me with their silence. I spent hours staring at the ceiling, replaying the events that had led to my downfall, searching for answers, for some explanation for the cruelty and betrayal I had endured. Sleep offered no escape, only nightmares filled with accusing faces and mocking laughter. I stopped eating, lost weight, and neglected my appearance. I was a shell of my former self, a ghost haunting the ruins of my past. One evening, as I sat alone in the dark, contemplating the wreckage of my life, a thought flickered in my mind, a spark of defiance in the face of despair. They wanted me to break. They wanted me to disappear. They wanted me to give up. But I wouldn't. I couldn't. I owed it to myself, to the people they had hurt, to fight back, to expose their lies, and to reclaim my life. The rage that had been simmering beneath the surface finally erupted, a burning fire that consumed my despair and ignited my determination. I would not be a victim. I would be a survivor. I would be their reckoning. The first step was to gather my strength, both physical and mental. I started exercising, forcing myself to get out of bed each morning and go for a run. The fresh air and the physical exertion helped to clear my head and restore my energy. I started eating regular meals, nourishing my body and rebuilding my strength. I sought therapy, talking through my pain and anger with a compassionate professional who helped me to process my emotions and develop coping mechanisms. It was a long and arduous process, but with each small step forward, I felt my resolve growing stronger. I started reviewing the evidence I had gathered, meticulously analyzing every document, every recording, every note. I looked for patterns, for inconsistencies, for any weaknesses in their carefully constructed facade. I realized that their biggest vulnerability was their arrogance, their belief that they were untouchable. They had become complacent, confident that no one would dare to challenge them. They had underestimated me. I began to formulate a plan, a strategy to expose their crimes and bring them to justice. It would be risky, dangerous even, but I was willing to do whatever it took to make them pay for what they had done. I knew that I couldn't do it alone. I needed allies, people who believed in me, people who were willing to stand by me in the face of adversity. I started reaching out to former colleagues, to friends, to anyone who might be willing to help. Some turned me away, afraid of the repercussions, but others listened, and a few offered their support. Slowly, painstakingly, I began to build a team, a network of people who shared my determination to expose the truth. The pieces started falling into place. The darkness inside me didn't dissipate. It focused. The game had changed. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was going on the offensive. I smiled sweetly at my brother during the next family dinner, acting as if nothing had happened, all the while knowing I was carefully planting seeds of doubt and suspicion in his mind with every word. I complimented my father's business acumen, subtly probing for details about the deals I knew were illicit, pretending to be interested in rejoining the family firm, while my phone recorded every interaction, diligently transcribing his words, capturing every nuance of his carefully constructed lies. It was a delicate dance. One wrong step and the whole plan would crumble. But I was meticulous, always playing the part of the prodigal daughter returning home,
eager to please, while I was secretly dismantling their empire piece by piece.
I knew their weakness, their arrogance, and their overconfidence in their ability to manipulate those around them. They believed they were untouchable. That belief would be their undoing. I started by focusing on the financial records, meticulously tracing the flow of money through shell corporations and offshore accounts. I needed concrete proof, something that couldn't be easily dismissed or explained away. I enlisted the help of a forensic accountant, a former classmate who had always been brilliant with numbers, someone I trusted implicitly with my life. I laid out the situation, explaining the risks involved, and she didn't hesitate. She had seen firsthand the devastation caused by corporate greed and was eager to help bring them to justice. Together, we spent countless hours poring over documents, analyzing transactions, and uncovering a complex web of deceit. We discovered a pattern of fraudulent invoices, inflated expenses, and hidden assets, all designed to evade taxes and conceal their illegal activities. It was a treasure trove of evidence, enough to bring down the entire operation. I also installed tiny, high-definition cameras disguised as everyday objects in key locations around their office. A pen, a clock, a smoke detector, each one strategically placed to capture their conversations and actions. I needed irrefutable proof of their conspiracy, evidence that couldn't be denied or manipulated. The risk was immense. If they discovered the cameras, my plan would be ruined. So I was careful, meticulous, constantly monitoring the feeds, ensuring that everything was operating smoothly. One afternoon, I was reviewing the footage from the pen camera in my father's office when I overheard a conversation between him and Mark. They were discussing a new deal, one that involved defrauding elderly investors out of their life savings. The details were sickening. Their callous disregard for human suffering was appalling. I felt a surge of anger, a burning desire to stop them, to protect those vulnerable people from their predatory schemes. But I knew I had to remain patient, to wait for the right moment to strike. I continued recording, gathering as much evidence as possible, documenting their every move. I also started researching the laws pertaining to fraud and financial crimes, consulting with legal experts to ensure that my evidence would be admissible in court. I needed to understand the legal landscape, to anticipate their defenses, and to build an airtight case that would withstand any challenge. It was a complex and demanding process, but I was determined to leave no stone unturned. Every detail mattered. Every piece of evidence was crucial to the success of my plan. There were close calls, moments when I thought they were on to me. My brother started asking pointed questions about my renewed interest in the family business, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. My father seemed more watchful, more guarded in his conversations. I had to be careful, to maintain my composure, to avoid arousing their suspicions further. I deflected their questions with vague answers, feigning ignorance and naivete, playing the role of the reformed daughter who simply wanted to reconnect with her family. It was exhausting, a constant act, but I knew it was necessary to protect my plan. One evening, I received a call from my forensic accountant. She had discovered something alarming. They were aware that someone was investigating them. They had hired a private investigator to track my movements, to uncover my secrets. The investigator was skilled, experienced, and ruthless. I knew I had to be extra careful, to cover my tracks, to avoid leaving any evidence that could lead them to me. I changed my phone number, switched to a secure email provider, and started using encrypted messaging apps to communicate with my team. I also varied my routes, avoided predictable patterns, and took extra precautions to ensure my safety. I felt like I was living in a spy movie, constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering who I could trust. But I refused to be intimidated. I was determined to see this through, no matter the cost. The anticipation was building. The day of reckoning was drawing near. I had gathered enough evidence, built a strong enough case, and assembled a reliable enough team to finally expose their crimes. I had a detailed plan of action, a carefully orchestrated sequence of events designed to maximize the impact of my revelations. I knew it was a gamble, a high-stakes game with potentially devastating consequences, but I was prepared to take the risk. I owed it to myself, to the families they had harmed, to the pursuit of justice. I had contacted a reporter at a major newspaper, a journalist known for her integrity and her fearless pursuit of the truth. I had shared my evidence with her, explaining the details of my investigation and the scope of their crimes. She was initially skeptical,
But after reviewing the evidence, she was convinced. She agreed to publish the story, to expose their crimes to the world. We coordinated our efforts, planning the timing of the publication to coincide with the filing of a formal complaint with the authorities. The goal was to create a media firestorm, a public outcry that would force the authorities to take action. I felt a mix of excitement and trepidation, a sense of anticipation and dread. I knew that once the story broke, there would be no turning back. My life would never be the same. But I was ready. I was prepared to face the consequences, to fight for what was right, to bring them to justice. The moment of truth was at hand.
The investigator they hired was good, disturbingly so. I found out he had already located my forensic accountant, followed her home, and was now digging into her background. They were closing in, faster than I anticipated. I had to accelerate the timeline. I decided to focus on the upcoming charity gala, an annual event hosted by my father, a who's who of the city's elite, a perfect stage to expose their hypocrisy. It was their biggest event of the year, the one where they preened and postured, showcasing their philanthropy while secretly lining their pockets. I had to turn their stage into their gallows. The key was Emily. She was the weak link, driven by ambition and desperate for her father's approval. I knew I could use her against them. I arranged a chance encounter at a local coffee shop, acting contrite and remorseful, begging for her forgiveness. I laid it on thick, tears streaming down my face, telling her how much I regretted my actions, how I had been blinded by anger and resentment. She lapped it up, basking in my apparent defeat. I told her I had stumbled upon some documents that I didn't understand and asked if she could take a look, claiming I just wanted to clear my conscience and make amends. She agreed, eager to prove her superiority and solidify her position within the family. I left the documents with her, a carefully crafted mix of genuine financial records and fabricated evidence designed to lead her down a specific path, a path that would ultimately expose their crimes. The fabricated evidence pointed to a secret offshore account, one that contained millions of dollars siphoned from the charity's donations. I knew she wouldn't be able to resist the temptation to investigate, to uncover the truth and expose her father's misdeeds, hoping to gain his favor and finally earn his respect. It was a risky move, relying on her ambition and her desire for validation, but I had no other choice. Time was running out. I watched her on the security cameras I had hidden in her office. She was like a rat in a maze, sniffing out the cheese, following the trail I had laid for her. She spent hours poring over the documents, her brow furrowed in concentration. She made phone calls, sent emails, and whispered frantically to people I couldn't identify, each action digging her and them deeper. The trap was set. All I had to do was wait for her to spring it. I knew she would eventually confront my father, armed with her discovery, eager to expose his crimes and claim her victory. That confrontation would be the catalyst, the moment when everything would unravel. I made sure to be near their office that day, monitoring the situation from a safe distance. I saw Emily storm into my father's office, her face flushed with anger and determination. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could imagine the accusations, the denials, the escalating tension. The confrontation lasted for hours. I watched as my father's composure crumbled, his carefully constructed facade cracking under the weight of Emily's accusations. He tried to deny it, to deflect blame, but Emily was relentless, pressing him with the evidence I had provided. Finally, he snapped. I saw him grab Emily by the arm, his face contorted with rage. I heard him yelling, his voice muffled but audible through the closed door. He was admitting everything: the fraud, the money laundering, a conspiracy. Emily looked shocked, horrified by the reality of her father's crimes. She tried to pull away, to escape, but he held on tight, his grip tightening, his anger escalating. I knew I had to intervene. I couldn't let him hurt her, even if she was part of the conspiracy. I called the authorities, reporting a disturbance at my father's office, claiming that I feared for Emily's safety. I knew it was a gamble, that it could expose my entire plan, but I couldn't stand by and watch him potentially unalive his own daughter. As I waited for the authorities to arrive, I saw my father lead Emily out of the office, his arms still tightly around her. They got into his car and drove away. I followed them, my heart pounding in my chest, fearing the worst. They drove to his secluded estate outside the city. It was a place I knew well, a place filled with dark memories.
I parked down the street, watching the house from a distance, waiting for the authorities to arrive. Hours passed. The authorities still hadn't shown up. I realized they were probably being stalled, that my father had connections that reached deep into the system. I couldn't wait any longer. I had to go in, to confront him, to save Emily. I approached the house cautiously, checking for security cameras and alarms. I found a back entrance and slipped inside, moving silently through the darkened hallways. I could hear voices coming from the study. I crept closer, pressing my ear against the door. I heard my father yelling at Emily, accusing her of betrayal, threatening to disown her. I heard Emily crying, begging him to stop. Then silence, a long, deafening silence. I kicked the door open and burst into the room. My father was standing over Emily, who was lying on the floor, unmoving. In his hand, he held a crimson-stained letter opener. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of rage and despair. "You did this," he spat, his voice trembling with fury. "You ruined everything." I stared at Emily, my heart sinking. Was she gone?
I rushed to Emily's side, checking for a pulse. Faint, but there. She was alive, but barely. My father stood frozen, the crimson-tinged letter openers still clutched in his hand. The sound of approaching sirens pierced the air. He knew it was over. His face, once a mask of arrogance and power, crumbled into a grotesque caricature of fear and desperation. The authorities swarmed the estate. He didn't resist as they apprehended him, his eyes vacant, his spirit broken. As they led him away, he looked at me, a flicker of recognition in his gaze, a silent acknowledgement of his defeat. The paramedics arrived and whisked Emily away to the hospital. I followed in a separate vehicle, my mind racing, replaying the events of the past few months, wondering if I had done the right thing, if the price of revenge had been too high. The news of my father's arrest spread like wildfire. The charity gala was canceled. His name was scrubbed from buildings and institutions. His empire, built on lies and deceit, crumbled before my very eyes. The newspaper published the exposé, detailing his crimes, exposing his hypocrisy, and revealing the extent of his corruption. The public outcry was deafening. Protests erupted outside his businesses. His colleagues and associates abandoned him, eager to distance themselves from the scandal. Even my brother vanished, his whereabouts unknown. Emily survived. After weeks in the hospital, she recovered from her injuries, both physical and emotional. She agreed to testify against our father, providing crucial evidence that helped solidify the case against him. The trial was a media circus. The courtroom was packed with reporters, cameras flashing, eager to capture every moment of the proceedings. My father pleaded not guilty, claiming he was framed, that he was a victim of a conspiracy. But the evidence was overwhelming. The financial records, the hidden camera footage, Emily's testimony, it all pointed to his guilt. He was convicted on all counts: fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, and attempted unaliving. He was sentenced to life in prison, his reign of terror finally over. I attended the trial, sitting in the back row, observing the proceedings from a distance. I watched as my father's world imploded, as his lies were exposed, as his power evaporated. I felt no joy, no satisfaction, only a profound sense of sadness and loss. This was not the victory I had imagined. It was a hollow triumph, a Pyrrhic victory that had cost me dearly. After the trial, I disappeared. I sold my assets, changed my name, and moved to a remote location, seeking solace in anonymity. I needed to rebuild my life, to heal from the trauma, to find peace. I used some of the recovered funds to compensate the victims of my father's schemes, hoping to make amends for his sins. I never spoke to my father again. His name became a curse, a symbol of betrayal and corruption. I also cut ties with my brother, unable to forgive him for his complicity in our father's crimes. Emily and I remained in contact, forging an uneasy alliance, bound by our shared trauma. We both struggled to come to terms with what had happened, to reconcile the image of our father with the monster he had become. We supported each other through the dark times, offering comfort and understanding. They lost everything: their reputation, their fortune, their freedom. They became pariahs, ostracized by society, haunted by their past. I just smiled. It was a small, fleeting smile, a momentary flicker of satisfaction, quickly replaced by a deep sense of weariness. Revenge isn't sweet. It's necessary. It's a bitter pill to swallow, a painful path to tread. But sometimes, it's the only way to achieve justice. It's not about seeking pleasure in another's suffering, but about holding them accountable for their actions, about protecting the innocent from their cruelty. Would you have done the same?
Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.